This video focuses on how to tweak and maintain maimai buttons. If you'd like to understand more about the buttons, it's recommended that you watch my previous video for that. I've played maimai for about 8 years on the official cabinet. I have a momokami, plenty of experience on how an official button should feel like, and some experience on tweaking buttons. Anyways, let's get started with tweaking. First up, you'd have to open up the button. Unscrew all 4 of these screws holding down the frame. You may choose to remove the rod, but as long as you have access to the metal piece, you are fine. Let's get started with how to tweak the button hardness. So this is the metal piece. It is flat by default from this view. So say if you want a harder button feeling, all you have to do is bend the copper piece upwards to this kind of shape, and it would require more force to be pressed down. And say if you want a softer key press, you can simply just bend downwards and it will just require lesser force to be pressed down. But keep in mind, I just mentioned that the default is flat. Basically, what you want to do is try to avoid going below flat, as in the softest you should go is flat, and anything lower than flat can cause this end to accidentally hit the optical sensor, causing the button to be registered as pressed. So in summary, the lowest you should go, as in the softest, should be flat. I mean, if you know what you're doing, of course you can go beyond that, but that is just my recommendation. Try not to go below flat. Otherwise, if you want a harder button, you can always simply just bend upward. So in conjunction with the hardness and the softness comes the travel distance. As you can see, the metal piece is L-shaped and this end is 90 degrees, more or less. So, but if you look closely, there's a gap here. Within the 90 degrees, there's a gap. So this gap is roughly about 1 millimeters. And same as the recommendation for hardness, I would suggest that you do not close this gap for less than 1 That's because if you close the gap too much, your L-shaped end might not actually block the optical sensor light. So in that case, you might have to actually press all the way down for this piece to interrupt the optical light for it to be registered as on. So in order to shorten the distance of the key press, you can just simply unbend this for now, and you can find some sort of object, for example maybe a coin, to determine the gap that you want for the 90 degrees and simply bend it back. So now this is not 1 it's more than 1 So basically, the bigger the gap, the shorter your travel distance will be, since the bigger the gap, that means the closer it is to the optical sensor. That is how it sort of works. In summary, try not to close the gap too much. I feel like the lowest you should go is 1 like I mentioned. So let's come back to this. Remember that I just recommended you to not go lower than flat in terms of softness, and no lesser than 1 for this gap. Well, if say you really want a softer button feel, you can always bend downwards and make the gap basically non-existent. So that way you can actually do a softer button without compromising on the travel distance issue like I mentioned earlier. However, I still do not recommend this. I feel like the lowest you should go is flat and 90 degrees, but 1 that's still my recommendation. If you're feeling confident, you can give it a try. You can always test it out since it's flexible. You can always bend it back to its original shape afterwards. There's no harm in doing that, but that is just my recommendation that I just want to put out there. So that's basically it for tweaking the hardness and the travel distance. It's fairly this simple. So let's talk maintenance. Maintenance is fairly simple. The official maimai manual says to grease this part of the metal piece every 3 months. And that's it. Alright, but why? So the method that this works is because the plastic button has this cut off where it's meant to be pressing down this part of the metal piece. So the manual says to grease this part every 3 months. Fairly simple. However, the manual never says to lube the rod. I need to mention that the rod is also one of the components doing most of the hard work. So here's how to maintain them. For every 3 months, open up the buttons, grease this part of the metal piece where it's in contact with the plastic, and also grease the rod. That's it. Oh, and if you're wondering which grease to use, I use the Hotaloop Full Synthetic Noise Reducing Gear Grease NR5G. As for the foam on the bottom, it will go flat if you hit it too much. So if you feel like your travel distance is getting longer and longer, it may be due to the fact that your foam has been pretty much flat. So to resolve this, all you need to do is just replace it. The specification of the foam tapes will be on the screen right now, and my recommendation is somewhere between 1 mm to 2 mm thickness. Now screw back all 4 screws and call it a day. It's that simple. One thing I have to mention is that the metal piece, in the end, is metal. It will rust, it will get corroded. So say if you are living in a humid temperature kind of country, you might want to prepare extra ones just in case your other ones go corroded. Just keep some sealed so you can change them whenever you like. This video is made in collaboration with DFSS, aka Chaiji Master. He's the one who taught me most of this stuff for making this video. This is a tool provided to me by DFSS for me to test out the button signal, whether it's pressed down or not. DFSS is well known in China for tweaking buttons that the Chinese maimai community loves. Very special thanks to DFSS. If you'd like to support him, or me, you can consider purchasing his or my tweaked buttons. His version is a shorter travel distance, recommended for controller use, and my version is the official button replicate. I haven't decided on the shipping and payment. You can contact me on Discord, and I'm sure we can work something out. Thank you for watching.